John.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Static Plain Truth Live, Episode 5, Season 2. We got Robert Harrington, RoboShark. How you doing, bud?
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we got people piling in, so hello to the live viewers, and I'll give everyone a chance to sort of pile in here, and we should have some more panel members, but just want to quickly thank everyone for joining us. What you been up to, Robert?
Well, I've been out in public a bit lately talking flat earth, and
Don't you feel like Smeagol from Lord of the Rings?
my precious. But no, I maybe later on in the show, but just as a preamble real quick, there was a dude that was having a smoke break outside a pool hall that I was at with my brother, and he had a tattoo on his arm, and if we talk about it later, I'll give the full story, but basically I recognized the tattoo, and it's not something that probably 99% of the people on the world would know, but I knew it, and it impressed him. He came over right away, shook my hand, offered me a smoke, which I declined because I chew tobacco, and I just talked to him about it, and I finally told him. I said, the Earth is flat. It didn't just like come out like that, but it was a good conversation, and you don't have those kind of conversations in public very often. Sometimes I go down to the lake and I meet somebody and you have a little bit of a conversation, but most of the time when you talk about this stuff, if you admit it, it's online, it's on a hangout, or it's in comment section. But recently I had this nice conversation with this dude, older gentleman, older than me. I'm 34, and I think he was probably in his 50s or so. And he was like, wow, that's really interesting. And not only did I drop the Morgile, but I dropped Jaren.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, I'm promoting both of those guys. I think obviously John, the Morgile, but
yeah.
I also thought to drop Jaren and Globebusters because I think they put out a lot of really good content.
Oh, obviously. Yeah, definitely. And,
people that are just first starting out, because they talk about it in a way that you wouldn't mind sending somebody new to their site. Like some other sites, I won't put any names on it, but you have to be already in the truth and in the flat earth movement maybe to even understand what the hell they're talking about, because they're using words, they're using acronyms that, a new person, what the fuck are they talking about?
Well, and it really is such a difficult topic to just strike up with a random person. It's not like the baseball scores from yesterday or whatever. This is something that if you do try to bring it up in a conversation with somebody who's never been introduced to the topic, you know how they're going to react. That they're going to immediately assume all sorts of things, because flat earth is a phrase that I think that does the entire thing injustice, not just because of the negative connotations, but it also, to me at least, it doesn't fully describe or fully encompass what's actually going on.
I always say stationary plane.
Well, there's that, but it's almost as if you have to say the non-Big Bang, non-galactic, non-solar, or non-heliocentric theory. Because
I don't even want to acknowledge that bullshit. I'm just going to say what I think is true, and if they start coming at me like, "Oh, what about the sun goes around?" And
right. Well, I guess what I'm saying is like, for example, flat Earth or stationary plane, and that's how I do sort of put it, is stationary plane. It seems a little better, and it doesn't have those negative connotations, but you still have to deal with the idea of infinite space and gravity and spinning and orbital mechanics, and there's just all of these sort of subconscious pre-programmed ideas that we have that we think are true. And I guess it really depends on your level of education or how interested you were in sciences. I know that I was particularly interested in pretty much all subjects in school, but I really had a fondness for the sciences in particular. And so, I realize that not all people are like that. And maybe it's because they saw that the idea of, accepted theoretical astrophysics, for example, is just so preposterous. It went in one ear and out the other, so to speak.
Class in 10th grade.
What was that?
I said I got kicked out of my biology class in 10th grade. Told me to get the fuck out if you're going to talk about this no evolution theory.
Well, I asked a lot of questions in science classes, and a lot of times there weren't answers. And I think it's because, I know now that it's because the model that everyone goes by and that we've all, been taught to believe is true and factual and verified is a preposterous lie, or a preposterous series of misunderstandings capped off by an immense amount of lies in the last 100 years or so. And that really is sort of a nice little segue into sort of a monologue that I prepared for today as we, gain more live viewers and panel members that should be popping in at some point. I know it's sort of odd hours for a lot of the panel members, it's a Saturday.
I'm excited to hear what you have to say, and I'm going to go ahead and mute my microphone and listen.
Okay.
Hope we get some more panel members, but if not, I'm sure we'll have a good show, and I will try to provide as much entertainment or knowledge that I have.
Oh yeah, we got plenty to talk about. That's for sure. We're gonna have a great show, and I appreciate you being here. So we'll definitely we'll definitely have time to cover a variety of topics, and maybe I can try to look at the chat a little bit. It's just really hard for me to try to manage the chat while
I'm going back and forth too. So I'm helping, but I'm going to go ahead and microphone now, John, and let's hear what you got to say, bro.
And I would say before I get started, if there's anyone out there that has any questions that you'd like for me to answer, put it in the chat. And Robert, if you could just try to monitor that a little bit, I'd really appreciate it.
I see to my right, it says to list available commands, enter, and I don't see any chat going on.
Okay, what you'll want to do is go to the actual YouTube show. So and it's the last time I did this, it was really hard to find. So I'll just go to my channel, and it says live now.
And you're on the Morgile one?
Yeah, it's on the main channel.
Okay.
And I'm really not sure how to find it. I tried to find the live show before, and it would not take me to it. So anyways, if you can find it, that would be terrific. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the illusion of curvature, which is a big thing for people that are, sort of looking at this for the first time. I remember when I was younger, the first time I went out to sea on sort of a private.
I'm getting feedback.
Curvature, which is a big thing. You want to mute your YouTube player. I remember when I was younger, the first time I went out to sea on sort of a private. I'm getting feedback. Curvature, which is a big thing. Okay. Yeah, you want to mute your YouTube player, and there we have it. Sorry about that, folks out there. Okay, so this illusion of curvature, it's a major factor in the confusion, I think, in the way we view the world. And what I was saying, and then was repeated through the feedback, and I'll just say again real quick, the first time I went out to sea on sort of a private vessel was very memorable. For me, because I was pretty young, and I climbed to the very highest point on it, which it seemed extremely high to an 8-year-old kid or whatever, but it was maybe 14, 16 feet, something like that. And I can remember thinking that I could see the curvature of the Earth, because what you see out there at sea, especially, it's not so much like if you're on a cruise. I've been on a couple of cruises before. But you don't get that full 360-degree view all the way around you. Now, considering real quick the amount of programming that goes into convincing people that the Earth is a sphere, pardon me 1 second. Frog in my throat, sorry. But the amount of programming that goes into convincing people that the Earth is a sphere makes it pretty easy for us to start inventing, supporting factors for this lie or for this presupposition. It's sort of like a magician's trick or sleight of hand, or even like something a hypnotist could achieve. This perpetuation of the spherical Earth in our mind was only made possible because people under the age of 5 were conditioned into believing this and into seeing what they're told to see as opposed to what we actually see, or into seeing what is presented to us as possible, or not seeing what is presented to us as impossible, if that makes any sense. In other words, we see what we believe is within the realm of possibility, and our subconscious mind does play a huge factor in filtering out what we may just assume to be bad data. But I feel it's a natural step for a person to take to imagine this curvature. I did it myself.
Is that showing?
What's that?
Is the screen share showing?
Oh, that's a good question.
I have it helps what you're saying.
Yeah, what you'll want to do, I think, is
I think it should be showing.
If we can check the live. See, I'm not sure. I can't get over to the live feed.
I have it up right here, and it shows just a picture of my face.
Are you presenting?
When I go to Google Hangouts, I'm presenting.
Yeah, so if you click on that green arrow that says screen share.
Yeah, I did that. It says at the top, you are screen sharing.
Okay. Well, you should be presenting, and I apologize to those of you out there if you're unable to see the slides.
Well, I'm going to go to it again here, and
yeah, and it seems as if I pause my speaking for a minute, then it does present. So, anyways, hopefully y'all can see it. If not, we're still on slide 1. But
okay, I'll go back to 1.
Yeah, and like I said, I've been on a few cruises over the course of my life, but on a cruise ship, I don't remember seeing this illusion of curvature as I did on a private boat. Again, that's because you don't get that 360-degree view of the ocean on a cruise ship. So I think that's why I don't remember the illusion of curvature so vibrantly on cruise ships. But
plus, you probably weren't looking for it either.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I guess the first time you're out at sea is probably the most memorable. And it just so happens the first time that I went out to sea, it was on a private, sort of a smaller private yacht. And that's why it was, so memorable. But I do remember specifically, seeing this illusion of curvature, because you are in sort of a unique position where there's nothing but sea and sky in all directions as far as the eye can see, like in all directions. And so what happens is the horizon line appears to be sort of a giant circle curving all around you in equal distances in all directions. And this really does create the illusion of curvature.
Right. It's kind of like an ant that's in the middle of a circular table, flat table. And he looks out at the edges every direction, and it looks like a curve, but it's still flat.
Exactly. And the atmosphere itself acts like a sort of a mirror, enveloping the observer at an equidistant circle in all directions. Furthermore, it is this reflective nature of the atmosphere at a distance which provides, I believe, the conditions necessary for rainbows. Now, I really hate to disagree or argue against other ball Earth skeptics, but there has been sort of a large wave of articles and videos purporting that rainbows are somehow proof of the glass dome in the sky. And to me, this is preposterous, as the atmosphere itself provides a subjective reflective dome, and say that 10 times fast, subjective reflective dome around any observer. But all it is exactly that. It is just a subjective dome.
Lens, all you want.
Right. Now, the fact that our atmosphere refracts light or bends light, and it also reflects light at certain distances, and it depends on barometric conditions, but it reflects light exactly like a mirror at certain distances, and it depends on humidity, air temperature, barometric pressure. So it is there are a lot of variables involved. It is merely, I believe, the atmosphere which provides the reflectivity necessary to produce rainbows, as the atmosphere creates a subjective dome around the observer. And of course, rainbows are subjective. So, they would appear to move with the observer, if that makes any sense. And of course, it's the atmosphere which
But
creates.
they don't though, John.
Well,
The rainbow doesn't seem to, in my opinion, move with the observer. And I have a photo that I would like to get on my computer, but it's on my phone right now, that I would like to show. And it's not a arc of a rainbow. It's just a rainbow in a cloud. The whole cloud is lit up with the Roy Biv, and there's no.
So the observer moves relative to the rainbow then, and I'm saying that wrong.
We were driving 50 miles an hour, and the cloud and the observance of the rainbow in the cloud never changed from my perspective going that fast. And it doesn't arc outside the rainbow. It's just the rainbow's lit up. I mean, the cloud is lit up like a rainbow. And we stopped at a stoplight, and there was this young kid. I rolled the window down. I said, "Hey, have you ever seen that before?" And I pointed, and he looked up, and then he looked very bewildered, and he said, "Nope."
Right. And yeah, and to me, it's fairly obvious that, obviously we can't see the stars during the daytime because the sky is this brilliant, bright blue unless it's a cloudy day. But even in a cloudless day, of course, you can't see the stars. However, I think that one thing that's odd is we can indeed see the moon during the day, which to me lends some credence to the idea that it may be reflected sunlight. There are a lot of flat earthers who purport that the moon generates its own light. However, I'm skeptical of that, and I'm still I'm open to different possibilities, but I'm still under the impression that the phases of the moon are caused by the relative position of the moon, the sun, and the observer. And it's simply because the sun travels apparently faster than the moon does. So the moon sort of recesses in its relative position to the sun over the course of a month. And, there's good evidence to support that, including eclipses. Solar eclipses are always conditional.
At this point, you can argue it either way because, there is some pretty good tests that say that the moon light is colder. And so how is it reflecting sunlight then? But then on the flip side, you have the sun and the moon in their track or circuit, as you call it, as I call it too, moving at different speeds that could cause the moon phases that way. But it doesn't necessarily explain to me why the moon has cold light.
Well, and that point was even raised way back in Zetetic Astronomy in the original print, where Dr. Robotham argued that it's impossible to reflect. He mentioned tones, like if you reflect the C tone, you're going to get a C. If you reflect cold, you're going to get cold. If you reflect heat, you're going to get heat. However, I tend to disagree. I can shine a white light at a reflector on a car, and it reflects red. And furthermore, we really don't know what the sun or the moon actually are. That's one thing. And I think that there's good evidence to support that what's being reflected off of the moon is not visible light. What's being reflected off of the moon is essentially radioactive waves or more along the lines of electromagnetic waves that have not had the opportunity to filter through our atmosphere to essentially diffuse or to render into visible light.
And thus having no heat to them.
And so if the moon has some physical properties, which I think that the moon may, I'm not sure, but I believe that the moon may have physical properties, then anything's possible. It could be absorbing certain frequencies or certain elements of the invisible spectrum that's possibly emanating from the sun and reflecting others. So if it's absorbing, certain spectrums of the invisible sunlight and reflecting others, then, I could see how it could have different properties. And yes, there is good evidence to support that moonlight cools. and that is very interesting. But I don't think that it's necessarily proof that it isn't reflected sunlight. Again, I'm still open for more data on this, but again, full solar eclipses are always conditional. It's going to be a new moon or no moon, and to me, that certainly makes sense if you're assuming or testing the hypothesis that the moonlight is reflected sunlight.
Right.
And there's other things, but again, in terms of
No, go ahead and finish your point.
I was going to say, in terms of rainbows, though, and whether I described that slightly incorrectly or not, the point is that the atmosphere itself acts as a giant dome mirror around you. And so for people to suggest that rainbows are proof of a physical, glass dome in the sky, I think that is, it's definitely too early to call that one, but I don't think that it's proof.
And I love the famous YouTuber, and I'm just going to say JS, and I think you guys know who I'm talking about. But I love him. I watch every video he puts out, but his idea is that the rainbow is because the lens above us is a dome. And I disagree respectfully. I think that there is some kind of a ceiling, but it's not made of anything physical. And it's definitely not something that extends down to the ground to make a dome. It's more like a barrier that you can't get any higher. Maybe plasma, maybe some kind of a...
Well, and my point, though, is any sort of dome or reflective necessity to create rainbows, because the argument is you need two mirrors to create a rainbow or whatever. But the simple fact is, and this is proven and this is demonstrable, is that the atmosphere itself behaves as sort of a concave mirror all the way around you. And this is at all times. The atmosphere is obviously thickest near the ground due to the principles of density and buoyancy. As you gain in altitude, the atmosphere does get thinner and thinner, but it's still, once at a certain distance above your head, the sky is reflective. And so you have all the mirrors and all of the conditions necessary to create rainbows without any sort of dome. And I would agree with you that if there is any sort of barrier to, how high we can go up, it's going to be something sort of, metaphysical. And by metaphysical, I mean plasma specifically, which, that's been imaged recently. And I'm not even going to say by whom and where, because it's been beaten like a dead horse. But it was in 2015 that it was finally imaged, these plasma tubes running meridianally, so north to south in the lower magnetosphere. And to me, that would be a major barrier for any sort of space exploration. And the fact that the Apollo astronauts and all the other, it was really only the Apollo astronauts who claim to have gone beyond that point. Obviously, that's just another pretty good indication that those guys didn't do anything except for, make some pretty cheap B films of a fake moon landing, right?
Well, I believe that they were some guys that came up in the system. They went to really nice colleges. They were approached by people, probably from the Freemasons, and they ended up becoming NASA astronauts. And until the end, they thought that everything they were doing was real. And then right at the end, they said, okay, you guys realize you're really not going up in a spaceship. There's no such, we're not doing that. So I don't know what they gave them or what they threatened them with, but they said, hey, everything you've been training for and everything you believed the last, 10 years, it's all not real. And you're going to go along, or we're going to do something, or we're going to pay you, whatever, If you see that picture of those astronauts sitting there after they supposedly went to the moon, they all look like they're disgraced. They have no honor.
Well, this is the way that I look at it. One of the things with Freemasonry is that not all Freemasons are, nefarious,
Actually, I
evildoers.
would say most are not. Most do not understand.
But what I think that they do in the hierarchy of Freemasonry is that they essentially profile people
Yes.
for psychotic tendencies. And I think that they're able to, and they've got it down to a science. I mean, they
You know what
figure
to
out
look
who's smart enough, who has
who's
certain
dumb enough.
character traits. Well, you have to be a certain level of smart to be devious and deceitful, and I think that really did show through with the infamous interview with the original Apollo crew, where they're sitting there. They almost look like they're sitting at their execution, right?
I 100% agree with that. That's if you watch that with an honest mind and heart and eyes, you're like, what are these guys portraying? Did they really just do the greatest human feat ever to be ever done? And they're just sitting there with their heads down and they look like they just got whipped by their dad.
Now, and the thing with Freemasonry is even, excuse me, I keep losing my voice. Pardon me 1 second.
Quit smoking.
Goodness gracious. No, I've got a little bit of a upper respiratory infection, but I'll be fine. But okay, so with Freemasonry, even in the first 3 degrees, which is the Blue Lodge, that's sort of the entry level positions, and yes, they do have to pay. It's
You have to take an oath.
Being a Freemason ain't free. You have to pay with money, but you also have to take an oath
Yes.
that if you divulge rather the lodge secrets, that you'll be put to death. And these oaths get more and more gruesome as they go up in level.
Yeah, and
And so
make you say, "Oh, I'll allow my throat to be cut and be disemboweled," and you have to actually promise that I will keep these secrets, and if I don't, then I allow you to disembowel me and cut my throat. And all.
now
Why would anybody take
here's
that
the
vow?
thing. Here's the thing, though. And this is why it works so well. Is that 99.9% of the Freemasons who take those oaths never learn any real, secrets. They just think of it as sort of, an antiquated process that they have to go through ceremony, and they do get benefits from it. I mean, they pay and they take these oaths, but they do get benefits from being members of the lodge. I mean, that's very obvious.
The benefit is you got a whole bunch of friends, and that's it.
Now, on the other hand, at certain levels, and I submit that all of the astronauts, the Apollo astronauts, and I would say 90%, if not 95% of all astronauts in the NASA programs and other national space programs are involved in these secret society clubs. And, people tend to scoff at those and, call you a tinfoil hatter if you say the Freemasons run the world. And I don't think that's true. I think that Freemasonry is merely a stepping stone or a gateway towards this inner circle, which always ends up leading to essentially royalty and the Vatican. It's very enticing to some people at those levels, but when it comes time for this person to fake the moon landings and say that they went to the moon, they're never going to talk because first of all, they've got these oaths that they've taken. They've got these big checks that they're going to cash for the rest of their lives. But also, in many cases at those levels, they will compromise these people and, let's just say, honey trap them, which, just a brief description or an example would be, let's just say Buzz Aldrin was with a couple of strippers in a hotel room. And I'm just making this up. But let's just say that there was something like that happen.
Good argument, yes.
Now, if that was on videotape, then there's yet another reason why Buzz Aldrin would never talk. And so, I think that there's multiple levels on how they're able to get people to be so deceitful. They've got them in checkmate spiritually, physically, monetarily, and it's just so much easier for them.
There's probably about, in my opinion, 5 different ways that you can talk to a human being to get them to do what you want them to do if you're in a place of authority. And you can threaten their life, you can threaten the lives of the ones they love, or you can go the other route and say, I'll give you $1 million or 10.
Oh,
And
and they
some of
use
these people, you say, I'll give you $5,000, and they'll be a crisis actor for you.
right, and it's really it's all of the above. It's not just one or two things. They've got these people sort of in checkmate, completely compromised. And so, if you think that an astronaut's ever going to admit to any of this, they won't. And so that's sort of a foregone conclusion. NASA's never going to come clean because they're cashing 20
What
billion
do
a
you,
year.
John, what do you say when you talk to a guy and you're trying to tell him a little bit about truth or something, and then he comes at you and says, I have a friend that works at NASA.
Hmm.
What do you
Right.
tell that? I know what I tell him. I would like to know what you tell him.
Well, it's compartmentalized. It's
Yeah.
compartmentalized to the point to where you may be working on some aspect of a project and have no idea what the remainder of the project is. And you may very well be on the up and up, and you may think that you're doing good work. And I've got family that was in the military and worked for the Pentagon that was involved at pretty high levels with the building of the Minuteman missile silos, which were to house nuclear missiles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've come to the conclusion that nuclear missiles, nuclear bombs, are a hoax. Now, I'm not saying that nuclear energy doesn't exist, but they're two different things. Now, does that mean that my grandfather was a liar? No, they actually
It means that
spent.
he actually believed it.
No, they actually built these things, but the fact is that it was all part of the hoax, and that's how they're able to get away with it. It's not that everyone is in on it. It's not that everyone is in on faking the globe. There may be a handful of people that understand the big picture, and there may be thousands of people working in these small compartmentalized projects that, for all they know, their little invention is going into space, but in fact, it goes in a trajectory directly into the Atlantic Ocean.
Yep.
At least that's what I've concluded, and I,
That's that's why I asked you that question for our viewers, because people are like, well, what about my friend who says he works at NASA? And you just explained it perfectly. It's compartmentalizing. And I always ask them, did your friend personally go into space or see the satellite go into space? No, but they built it. Well, is that really proof? And then they kind of roll their eyes back in their head and they think you're crazy. But the fact of the matter is, you're making a good point. Did you actually see it? No, you didn't, and nobody has.
Yeah, well, and I think Jeranism did a really good job covering this. It was the SpaceX landing one, stage 3. I don't know. It was a few months ago, but it was sort of
No, David Weiss did a really good one, and I know Jaron did too because I'm a moderator on his site now.
right.
But David Weiss did a really good one where he's like, "Are you guys thinking that this is possible?" Where I think I don't know what he said the weight of it was, but it was over 1,000,000 pounds or something, and it just has these 2 or 4 little tiny feet at the bottom, and it's going to land on a ship that's in the ocean that's moving around, and it's just going to land all nice and clean. And you believe that? Most people do. It's ridiculous.
Right. And I think the point is that not all of the people that are involved with that are part of the deception. Most of the people involved with that program probably actually believe that that's what occurred. However, physically impossible, especially if the Earth was a spinning sphere. I could see them maybe pulling something like that off, with the Earth being a stationary plane. And in fact, I see that, backwards rocket landing as very good evidence of the Earth being stationary. But that's sort of opening a whole nother can of worms.
Well,
But
I wanted to say on the topic of false, lies and deception and all this kind of thing. Um, do you believe that it's possible that even the people like maybe me and you that think that we have come upon the real truth, do you think it's possible that even we are deceived?
well, here's the thing. I don't believe that I'm deceived any longer in terms of the shape of the Earth, because I'm still open to experimentation and I'm still open to inquiry. Whereas in the heliocentric sort of paradigm and the scientism paradigm,
Yep.
everything's all figured out. The Earth is measurable, it's finite.
Don't tell me I don't know what I know, because I already know it, because I went to school.
Right. And so, I'll admit that the flat Earth model has a lot of fleshing out to do. We've got a lot of work out, cut out for us. But at the end of the day, the heliocentric model has, ostensibly a 500-year head start. And so with that in mind, I'm in no big rush. I don't think that we should feel any pressure to come up with a complete working model of the heavens and the earth and everything in between, because first of all, some things are not meant for us to know. Some things we're incapable of understanding, and I'm okay with that.
Just disproving the accepted model is good enough to me. I mean, disproving the fact that we are on a spinning ball, spherical model, I just think that disproving that is good enough. And then you can just openly say, honestly, I don't know. I think it's flat. I'm pretty sure that the stars kind of rotate around us. The sun and the moon are pretty paradoxical, but I think they do this, but I don't really know. And you just admit it. You just say, I don't know. But I do know that we are not on a spinning ball that is flying through space at breakneck speeds. I mean, John, you and I have talked about mechanical shit, orbital mechanics for a long time, and that shit doesn't make no damn sense.
No, it really doesn't. And I sort of found out through trying to animate, an orbital relationship between the galaxy, the sun, the Earth, and the moon, and it's really
it has to go backwards to make sense, right?
Yeah, it's physically impossible for what they're saying to occur is occurring. And this is sort of a tangent that I wasn't prepared for, but just off the top of my head, you have to invert all of the speeds. And so, okay, the galaxy itself
backwards. I mean, John, I didn't mean to go on that tangent with you.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay,
because it's one of those things that's really important. And I've thought about orbital mechanics my whole life. Again, I've sort of been into the sciences my whole life, and I never really got too deep into the accepted model until the last year as a flat earther, which is sort of typical.
Well, now it's been almost 2 years.
15 months, whatever. But prior to really looking into this deeply, I was, let's just say when I was first introduced to the idea of, the Earth orbiting the sun, I figured it would be sort of a chaotic thing where instead of a chaotic orbit because everything's in motion, they allege that the Earth orbits the sun on a single plane. It's called the ecliptic. And
it's really organized, and no meteors ever hit, or if they do, it doesn't hurt anything.
Right. And so they allege that the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, all of the stars essentially rotate along another plane, which is, you can call it the galactic plane or the galactic equator. However, the ecliptic, our little solar plane, is wedged into the galactic equator at a 60-degree angle, according to the heliocentric model. And this is just this one single fact alone completely disproves the entire heliocentric model, because visible space during summertime would be, say, northwest of the galactic equator, and visible space during the 6 months later during wintertime would be southeast of the galactic equator. And so, just that one single fact, because we can see all of the same stars year round, completely debunks the heliocentric model 100%. And yet all of these very brilliant theoretical astrophysicists and astronomers have never, really sat down and thought about this. But in terms of animating an orbital relationship between the galaxy, the sun, the Earth, and the moon, theoretically, of course, you've got to invert the speeds of everything. So the galaxy, which is allegedly flying anywhere from 1.34 million miles an hour, which is a number that I've seen repeatedly, and I've heard numbers mentioned in the many millions of miles an hour, but that's how fast the conventionally accepted model claims the galaxy flies through space. At the same time, they say that the sun is going around in circles around the galactic equator at almost 500,000 miles an hour in a 250 million year cycle.
And why is it that they use so many goddamn sixes?
Right.
Why is it? Why can't they say that we're going at 467 or 447 miles an hour? Or why can't they say that we're going at 328 miles an hour? No.
We're going, and it has changed.
Every 666. We're going 66,000. We're going 670,000. We're going. Why?
The numbers have changed over time, and they'll probably change them again sometime in the future. But the fact is, in order to get even an animation of a simple orbital relationship from galaxy to sun to Earth to moon, you have to invert the speed. So the slowest body on that animation is going to be the galaxy. The next faster body would be the sun, and then faster still the Earth.
Moon is going around at so much of a speed.
Exactly.
We only see it have its phases, and it goes around supposedly to us in our vision in a slow rotation. And yet, if you do the math like you just said, it should be going faster than the sun.
Well, and the thing is it's theoretically possible, but the fact is that the Earth doesn't move at all, and this is provable. I mean, you can demonstrate this many different ways, and again, that we've covered that topic a bunch, and we can get into that. But I just wanted to really quick get back to we had mentioned how there's a lot of flat earthers who purport that rainbows are caused by the dome in the sky, and of course I believe that that's merely atmospheric refraction, which creates the illusion of the apparent curve of the Earth as well. If you're at a high enough vantage point out at sea with a 360-degree view around you, it does appear that you'll see sort of a horizontal curve of the Earth. But again, that's just atmospheric reflection.
And I personally agree with that. Whether I'm right or not, I might not be.
Well, and what this says is our eyes can deceive us, especially when we're primed for the duration of our formative years with fallacious and even ridiculous hypnotic suggestion leading up to our observation of the natural world. And so it's very it's very difficult to escape, and even if we have moments of clarity throughout our life, we just sort of bury that away as coincidence
go back into it. Because what is the choice? You're either gonna go forward thinking that the Earth is flat, or you're gonna maintain your friends and your lifestyle. Those are the only two options. Because if you say, all right, I've seen the truth, and I'm going to go forward, and I believe the Earth is flat. Guess what? You just lost all your friends. And, if you let me tell my story about yesterday, which I don't even like talking about, but yesterday, my own father, who I love, stood in front of me, and he's never been an angry man, but he told me, you need to shut up, basically. And he yelled at me. He said, "You need to shut up."
Well,
So I did. I did. What else am I going to do? But
yeah, it is like I said, it's a difficult topic because it's not just flat Earth. It's okay, you have to literally reconsider everything that you've formed your worldview on for your entire life, right
Yep.
down to the, to the core of your belief system. And that's, flat Earth is a deterrent to that, I think. The phrase itself, again, it's the negative connotations. And so,
A deterrent is a good word to use because even though the negative connotation, it really does describe what we deal with when we produce things that we believe are truth, and then we get opposition.
well, and think about what they believe, though, and this is a really important point. I mean, people actually believe that the universe was created as an explosion where there was nothing, and then essentially nothing, or I guess the technically correct way to put it would be that all of the matter and energy in the entire universe was compressed into an area the size of either a golf ball or a pea or a quark,
A ballpoint pen, and then all of a sudden it exploded.
that exploded. And now, fast forward some 13 billion years, and people believe that they live stuck to the side of a spinning sphere in the vacuum of outer space on the edge of an explosion in a spiral galaxy flying through space at over 1,000,000 miles an hour. I mean, it is the most preposterous, ridiculous belief system. And, I used to think back on, the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans and how they believed in these gods, Zeus, and they actually believed in this sort of thing. But, I mean, just think of how ridiculous our belief system is going to look in, say, 100 years, because the heliocentric model is finished. It's been completely debunked, but it's going to take some time to undo, all of what's been done over the last 500 years, apparently.
I think it's going to take at least maybe 15 more years before 100% of everybody on the planet knows that the Earth is flat. I think in the next 5 years, probably 80% of the people are going to be anti-government and flat earthers. That's my prediction. But I do believe that within 10 years, the critical mass will hit and everybody's going to know the Earth is flat and fuck government.
Now,
I'm wrong, and I hope I'm not.
As a side note, it's sort of difficult to find images of the illusion of the horizontal curvature at sea that I was describing before. But that first slide sort of sums it up, although that may be a bit of a fisheye lens. But that's sort of how it looks like when you're out at sea and you climb up 14 or 16 feet. You really do. It really does look like there's curvature out there. But again, that's a horizontal curvature caused by atmospheric reflection. And you can probably find some videos where you can get a visual of what I'm describing if you don't have access to a boat. If you want to if you can switch to the second slide or the second page, besides the illusion of horizontal curvature created by the equidistant circle of reflective atmosphere around an observer at sea, we're also led to believe that there is vertical curvature, or downward dropping away of distant objects, which is merely the operation of perspective and honestly has nothing whatsoever to do with Earth's non-existent curvature. We're all familiar with the now fairly famous photo from Joshua Nowicki from Grand Mere State Park. He shot a picture of the Chicago skyline from nearly 60 miles away.
And the video from Rob Skiba, I have to say.
Yeah, Rob Skiba does some great work. Now, if the Earth was indeed a sphere with the given proportions, that the tops of the tallest buildings of that Chicago skyline would be nearly a quarter mile below the horizon.
And they were tipped over.
Yeah, and there's a lot of argument against that, but that stretch, if you're looking at a stretch of that skyline from so many miles away, you're looking at, I don't know, anywhere from 20 to 50 miles of skyline. And over that distance, there should definitely be a high point. If the Earth was a sphere, there should be a high point in the middle, according to your perspective.
The building in the middle that has the steeple on top, the antenna on top, that should be kind of a lot higher than the side buildings.
Yeah, and you can do the math. I mean, if you figure, I mean, and it would be guesswork, but if you figure it's 50-mile stretch of skyline there, which may be pushing it. Yeah, I don't want to get into math without having it accurate, but you can do the math on it, and obviously, we can see skyscrapers from 60 miles away. I spoke with, well, this was on Globebusters with Bob, and we had another radio tower technician on. Her name was Robin, I believe, and she recalls sending line of sight radio shots over 110 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And this clearly proves that there is no vertical dropping away as, you know, as an inverse square of the distance in miles. And I can understand how theoretical physicists and astronomers could make this mistake, as they too were apparently raised with the assumption that the Earth is a sphere. And so it escapes, apparently, even the brightest minds and highest paid scientists to take a single measurement or conduct experimentation to either prove or falsify the heliocentric model.
The sad thing is, because you have people that are very highly educated, but how are they highly educated? The reason why they are they are considered to be highly educated is because they were a little kid just like you and I. They went to high school. Who knows what grades they got? And they must have had enough money to go to a nice college. You know, I was second in line to be valedictorian at my high school, but I didn't have enough money to go to college. So instead, I made money doing something else. But there are people, and they go to college, and they learn, and then they come up with all these theories. But what did they actually really look at with their own eyes? Nothing. Why would you believe anything?
Right. Well, you know, it's almost as if
that's my only point.
Well, it's almost as if a person's level of education can make it more difficult to understand and come to the realization of the truth, because you know, of course, they are far more deeply sort of indoctrinated. Exactly. Now, in terms of the atmosphere behaving as a giant subjective reflective dome above and around any observer, depending on, you know, atmospheric conditions, this apparent encasement can vary wildly.
Don't say dome anymore.
Well, it does, though. It creates sort of a dome.
Lens.
Yeah, I mean, it is exactly like a giant convex lens above and around you.
But don't say dome, because people hear dome and then they have a whole bunch of bad connotations from the word dome. Just like you don't say flat earth, you say stationary plane. Lens.
Well, a dome is a dome is a dome. And
I know, but a lens is a dome also. But you just use the word lens instead because dome has a bad connotation.
Right, and I would always preface it with a subjective, reflective, atmospheric dome. But if you want to,
I'm not. You did preface that, and I wasn't trying to be difficult. So
no, you're fine. I always like when people play devil's advocate, because it helps to hone the argumentative.
Don, it's not that I disagree. I just think that there's better wording.
Oh yeah, definitely. And if you could switch to the third slide, the same principle applies to the illusion of curvature in an airplane. And I've flown on commercial jetliners, and admittedly, I believed I was able to see this horizontal curve of the Earth, or like a frowning of the horizon line. But if you study this phenomenon objectively, you'll notice that the Earth beneath you is indeed a plane. Yet it is the atmosphere which begins to reflect light back towards you at a specific distance away, again, depending on barometric conditions at the time.
Now, and John, even though I agree with you, I think our listeners want to know from a scientific perspective how you come to that conclusion, because they're saying, oh, well, I look at it and it looks like a curve. And you're telling me that because of certain scientific things, the reason why you see it as a curve is because of that. And well, I know what you're talking about, but I think our viewers need to know why a flat plane looks like a curve because of atmospheric refraction and light. So
Well,
let's
and really,
let's take
it's
10 minutes to
reflection.
explain. I know, but we need to explain it, Fred. I think maybe 10 minutes just explain it because there might be people watching going, these guys are nuts.
Yeah,
There's
and
a
if
there's a
okay, so
picture and it looks curved.
if you want to go back up to the first slide, the
Okay.
best way to explain it is, again, if you're out on a private little boat or a private yacht out at sea, and there's not you can't see anything but sea and sky all around you in all directions. Now, at a specific distance, and that distance will vary depending on humidity and barometric pressure, but at a given time there'll be a specific distance where the atmosphere towards the ground level or towards the sea level will become reflective. And that's just a scientific fact. It's a fact of life. And it has to do with, well, think about if it's a foggy day. If
Well, it's an observable, repeatable, testable fact, and that is true because there is water, and water acts as a lens. And when water and light meet, it is a reflective surface, and so it's going to change your perspective of whatever you're looking at.
Right, but it's also subjective because if you were to instantly travel to that point where you see the atmosphere reflecting back at you, it would move back exactly proportionate with how far you move.
Yeah,
Um, and
that's
so
subjective
the
or basically perspective because depending on which place you're standing on this flat Earth, it's going to look different. But right.
Well, and yeah, so essentially, the best way to describe it is at a certain distance, the atmosphere becomes reflective, and it does create this illusion of an equidistant circle of reflective horizon all the way around you, and it does appear as a curve. And that's even the case if you're up in a high, or if you're looking at footage from a high altitude weather balloon or in an airplane. And again, I've flown on commercial jetliners, and I believed I was able to see this sort of frowning of the horizon. But they do use convex windows, so that does add to the illusion. But essentially, it is the atmosphere which begins to reflect light back towards you at a specific distance away. And I've spoken with many pilots who agree that the often alleged, visible horizontal curve of the Earth from an airplane, end quote, is merely an optical illusion, as the level of the horizon doesn't drop vertically as it should if the Earth were a sphere. The horizon level should drop vertically, proportionally inverse to the altitude of you, the observer.
Oh
But
man, perfect way to put it.
Thank you. But instead, the horizon line remains fixed on about the level with the eye, regardless of altitude. And so this is another big proof. And, people argue, well, airplanes don't go high enough, but, 20, 30 miles up. And I do have a slide further down, and we'll touch on the infamous Felix Baumgartner Red Bull jump. But
That's it.
that curvature that we think we see from out at sea or from an airplane is merely an optical illusion.
No, maybe go down to that.
What's that? We'll get to it.
Okay.
But yeah, the level of the horizon doesn't drop proportionally inverse to the altitude, and so even with high altitude weather balloon footage, which unlike within the confines of an airplane, along with those convex windows in the airplane, which add to the illusion. Weather balloon footage without a fisheye lens gives us a unique perspective with, again, a full 360-degree view of the heavens above and the ground beneath. If you can go down to slide 4.
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
1, 2, 3. Is that the one you want?
It should be a... Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's the one right there, and that's a pretty famous high altitude weather balloon shot. I think this one goes up close to
right.
No, that's not that one. We'll get to that one, but I think this is from about 30 miles up, or this particular weather balloon does get up to about 30 miles, and we can clearly see that there is no sort of frowning of the horizon, which and that's because they didn't use a fisheye lens.
Inbox to play North Force. I have BT on there too.
Now, I'm really still amazed at how they, whomever they are, have managed to pull off this major deception. And I must say that a huge part of this, in the modern sense, involves the so-called fisheye lens. And for a little bit of background on how this awfully stupid invention was conceived, I'm just going to read a little bit out of Wiki because I thought it was sort of funny. The fisheye, and this is coming from Wiki, fisheye lens is an ultra-wide angle lens that produces strong visual distortion intended to create a wide panoramic or hemispherical image. Hey, Robert, can you mute yourself, bud?
Hold on. I'm talking to my brother.
Okay. Yeah, all right, thanks. Fisheye lenses achieve extremely wide angles of view by producing images with straight lines of perspective, or rectilinear images, opting instead for a special mapping, for example, equisolid angle, which gives images a characteristic convex, non-rectilinear appearance. The term fisheye was coined in 1906 by American physicist and inventor Robert W. Wood, based on how a fish would see an ultra-wide hemispherical view from beneath the water, a phenomenon known as Snell's window. You learn something new every day on Wiki, I'll tell you. Their first practical use was in the 1920s for use in meteorology. And I think that's important. Their first practical use was in the
Is a good question, because
like what could possibly be practical by viewing the world as a fish?
No. The other question is, why would you listen or even give any information to your own brain to something that said that it was unpractical?
Right.
Of course you want to listen to practical shit. Unpractical is fake. Why the fuck would you want to,
Exactly. And so, and this sort of answered the question for me that the first practical use was in the 1920s for use in meteorology to study cloud formations, giving them the name whole sky lenses. The angle of view of a fisheye lens is usually between 100 and 180 degrees, while the focal lengths depend on the film format that they're designed for. Now, here's the part that I was going to end on. Mass-produced fisheye lenses for photography first appeared in the 1960s and are generally used for their unique, distorted appearance. Okay, so practical uses, meteorology, and that's the only one I can think of. And they're generally used for their unique, distorted appearance. Now, the reason I have such a hard time with this is why would, for example, in the Felix Baumgartner Red Bull jump, and even apparently with a lot of NASA footage, why would they want a unique, distorted appearance for scientific observation and study? I mean, this just obviously screams deception.
It's supposed to be a very clear video or picture. Instead, all we get is, just disruption. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I can understand using such a distorted version of images for meteorology. I suppose there's some good use for such a thing, but in terms of documenting scientific exploration or high altitude footage of the world, I mean, there's no sense in it. There's no sense in it other than the fact that some decision makers at high levels on the totem pole are actually fish. No, I'm kidding. This means that somewhere along the line, the decision was made
I know what you mean, man.
To fake the curvature of the Earth for official high altitude demonstrations.
It's actually a good analogy, but keep going.
And yeah, if you can switch to slide 5, I think that's probably the one showing all the fisheye lensage. Yeah. And so that's sort of the famous Felix Baumgartner Red Bull jump, which is obviously a fisheye lens. And if you want to, you
Never
can.
shows the other angle though.
Yeah, you can scroll back and forth between 5 and 6, because if you go down to 6, it shows it's just a couple frames of that video, but it shows when he pops open the hatch, that drastic or dramatic curvature isn't there. Yeah, it's like where he's just popped open the hatch. It's number
This one right
6.
here.
Yeah, and so you can see the difference between 5 and 6. It's almost like the Earth is a pregnant belly on 5, but on 6, it's quite clearly, just as we always see the horizon. Yeah, it's a razor edged, flat surface.
Curve, flat.
Exactly, and so in the case of Felix Baumgartner's infamous Red Bull jump, to the untrained eye, it would appear the dude is so high up he can see the curvature of the Earth, leaving no room for further discussion about the shape of the world, because everybody already knows the Earth is a spinning sphere anyway, so, it just makes sense. But upon closer inspection, it becomes fairly obvious that whomever coordinated that jump knew they would need to fake the curve of the Earth. So the perpetuation of this lie goes, far beyond NASA and the space agencies. In these two slides that we're looking at, it's so very obvious that they're using a series of fisheye lenses to fake curvature, which really begs the question, why and to what levels does this deception go? I mean, how many people are in on it?
That's a good question to ask. How many people really know? And how many people are actually just in the, they're people that help, but they don't really know. They're compartmentalized, so they think they're building a satellite, but they're really not.
Oh yeah. Oh, they'll design them, and there'll be companies.
How many people are really in the know? Is my question. How many people are really in the know?
Well, and it's
I think there's less than 20. Anybody have an idea?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that many. And, the same thing goes for places like CERN. You have scientists who are sifting through data and, inventing or writing algorithms. And, for all they know, they're being applied to some, segment of CERN or to NASA or to the next probe or space probe or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're just... they're just basically pissing in the wind, excuse the French, but that's really the perfect analogy. But no, are they in on this deception? I don't think so. They're Felix Baumgartner must be.
They might not be bad people, but they're definitely spewing, spewing, spewing false, negative crap.
I'd like to, and this is an open invitation, I'd like to interview Felix Baumgartner, as he's one of the...
That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Well, he's one of the few people who's been in a position to see the Earth morph from a plane while he was in the capsule to an extremely small sphere when he stepped out. I mean, really, if you look at that, I guess it was the 5th slide, that is one small sphere. Considering New Mexico covers about half of the Earth, according to that footage, which is, of course, ridiculous. But, to the untrained eye, it would just assume, people just assume that that's the spherical Earth. Now, NASA's lies and the programming leading up to, especially the Apollo missions and right up to this day, I'm looking forward to seeing the new Star Trek movie, by the way. They're not as fun anymore.
Well, I will just make a small commentary and say that even though obviously I don't believe in space, I love the fucking Star Trek movies. Chris Pine, I mean, it's fucking entertaining, right?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be pretty good.
Do you disagree? I mean, it's fucking entertaining, but you have to watch it with the eyes of knowing that it's completely erroneous.
Right. Well, that's part of the romance of, a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, exactly.
Sort of thing. Well, I guess that's Star Wars, but when you realize that there is no such thing as a galaxy, then it sort of loses its romance. But we can still, we can still patronize Lucas and Spielberg, I guess.
I don't want to be a patronage of those motherfuckers, though. I like watching their movies, but motherfuckers,
Well, and the thing is, NASA and the government have been, secret elements of the government have been big sponsors of a lot of mainstream production companies, movies, shows, and they used to put their logos, if you remember the old propaganda Bugs Bunny pieces selling war bonds, it would say, paid for by the Department of the Treasury or whatever. But nowadays they keep it a little bit more covert. Yet they do fund and back specific genres that reinforce, the idea of infinite space. And NASA and their lies are really, obviously an important part of the deception, as NASA has been the chief driving force in this greatest of all deceptions for essentially as long as they've been in business. They started out with very sort of nefarious roots. It goes back to Operation Paperclip with the Nazis.
Well, I don't think we really need to go that far back, because the people that are watching the show already know about that, and if they don't, well, maybe they're going to do a little bit of learning. But the point that I'm about to bring up is that NASA has been about this fucking lie spreading shit for, I don't know, maybe 200, maybe 150 years. And most of the people that you see, I'm not talking about YouTube people. I'm talking about when you walk around in real life, you meet somebody on the golf course or at the fishing lake, or if you go to the grocery store, you meet somebody, you have a regular conversation with them, and they all tell you, oh yeah, we went to the moon. Earth is a sphere. And they talk about all this garbage.
Well, and I think a lot of it has to do with it's pop culture, science fiction, and all of that was really heavy leading up to the Apollo missions, and it was geared towards programming people into accepting, space travel, but even deeper, on a psychological level. It sort of forces us to accept that the world is insignificant, one of billions of worlds, and it's only sort of by chance that the conditions for life were made possible.
And that's the biggest lie.
Yeah, I mean, and it all stems from this heliocentric model. I mean, it really, people always ask, well, what difference does it make? But it really makes all the difference in the world. For example, they claim that we just so happen to be in the right position relative to our sun, that water can comfortably phase between
3.6 degrees. And then if it's only 1% less in one direction, then everything dies.
Right. I mean, they claim that if we, weren't in this Goldilocks zone, then, water would boil, and boil away. Or if even if barometric pressure were slightly different, then we wouldn't be able to retain liquid water. And
there's human beings walking around on Earth that actually believe that.
Right. Well, and that's what, that's what I've believed for the majority of my life. And
I know, and I have too, but I'm saying that the 90% of people walking around on Earth don't believe that. And they're stupid. I don't say stupid, I say ignorant. And they just walk around and they just think.
Well, and the problem is it's, I don't even think it's, we could call it ignorance, because if you're not aware that there are other options, or if you're not aware that there are other models to be considered or debates to be had, then you just, or one just believes what they've been taught to believe. And so that's why I think it's so important just to simply wake people up to this, and why I'm not so concerned with a 100% accurate, fully functioning, working model of the stationary plane Earth, and why I tend to focus more on disproving or debunking the heliocentric model, which is really a piece of cake. The whole thing is so ridiculous, and if we can wake people up to this, the more people we wake up to this, I see this.
John, the funny part is that it is so easy to tell somebody that the spinning Earth model is so stupid that how do you even understand? I mean, you're spinning around faster than the speed of sound. You're flying through.
It's gravity. It's gravity.
Yeah, you're flying through space at over 500 miles an hour. You believe that, right? And they're like, well, no. Why would I believe that? I'm like, well, that's what they told you in school.
Right.
They don't know that. They don't know it. They do not know it. And then I just tell them, hey, yeah, you really honestly do believe that you're spinning faster than the speed of sound. So your head is making a sonic boom. And they're like, well, no. And I'm like, well, yeah. Well, that's how it works. That's how it fucking works.
There's an argument for everything. That they claim that the atmosphere is velcroed to the frame of reference with the Earth, and so there is no sort of disparity or no phase in the inertia, I guess. But it really is.
That's always their argument. That is perfect. Ace, is that Ace?
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
There's always an argument for everything, but simple measurement, lack of curvature shows no sphere, and I've used a clip a few times, but if you go, you can search out some clips of trick flights. And anytime a pilot does a nosedive, regardless of how many loop-de-loops and which direction they've gone, if you do a nosedive in a plane, the ground is always stationary beneath you, which is, again, very conclusive, 100%.
Yep. If you're going down in a plane in a stationary direction, you're going down straight, right? If the Earth is spinning, you should have to divert your angle. Isn't that
right? Airline flights would be impossible, at least to land.
Shouldn't be realized that if you're going down in a plane, you can't just go down straight. You got to kind of go down at an angle because the Earth is spinning, right?
Well, the common claim is that the airplane maintains or preserves the frame of reference that was only lent to it by the face of the Earth before takeoff, which is just so ridiculous because an airplane is traveling in free space essentially on its own propulsion, and one of the fundamental laws of motion is that an object in motion will tend to maintain its velocity until enacted upon by some other force. Now, if a plane is spinning, at the equator, if it's spinning around eastwardly at 1,037.5 miles an hour, when it takes off and heads west, they claim that it continues to travel east at 1,037.5 miles an hour. This is so ridiculous because not only would it have to be traveling east that fast, but it would also have to be falling vertically at about 135 miles an hour to maintain its frame of reference with the face of the Earth.
The downward curve of the Earth.
Well, exactly.
They don't even think of that. They don't even think about it. Okay. Woo! Have you ever been on the fucking woo? You feel it, and you talk to people, and they're like, "What are you? You're crazy."
Well,
like,
the point is,
I've actually been on a roller coaster with you, my wife, my friend, my brother, my family member, and you feel it. Woo! And you're telling me that you don't feel it right now? You don't feel. Woo! You don't feel that? And
right.
They literally tell me, I don't feel it. Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's fucking proof. It's
Well,
fucking proof.
nah,
You
we're
don't
used
feel
to
it.
it. The thing with the airplane is though is it just defies common sense because you obviously cannot be
That's the whole point
you
of
cannot
what
be
I just said.
traveling 500 miles an hour west and ascending into the air
Nope.
while at the same time falling backwards 1,000 miles an hour east and dropping 135 miles an hour downward. So
It makes no fucking sense.
the only solution to airline flights being possible, or the example I use a lot is a flight from New York to LA and back. The flight durations are often identical. Sometimes the eastbound flight is shorter than the westbound flight, which is the opposite of what you'd expect if the Earth was spinning east. But the only solution to this is that the Earth is stationary. And, it's just yet another fairly obvious proof that the Earth isn't a spinning sphere. The fact is, this goes so much further than the Earth not being a spinning sphere, because people just think, oh, so what? You think we're on a disk in outer space? And what I'm saying is there's no such thing as a planet. There's no such thing as a solar system, a galaxy, or a universe as we know it. All of these premises are theoretical. And we're really pushed hard through the mass media outlets for the last 60 years or so, especially in order to, again, to pre-program people into accepting whimsical fantasies such as space travel, setting up permanent bases on other worlds, and eventually, getting off this poison, stinking rock and moving to the next planet. I truly believe...
John, really very quickly.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry about this, but
yeah.
Before we got live, I told you a little bit about how my brother and my dad and all that.
Yeah.
No, my brother, while we were live, he came over here and he asked me if I want to go golfing. So, even though he has different beliefs than me, I'm going to go golfing with him.
Awesome. We'll have fun.
Our tee time is in 30 minutes, so I got to go. But
awesome. Well, have a good round.
I know that, but I want you to know that I really actually want to stay here and talk to you guys. But please, even if you're not a God-fearing person, maybe just lift up your head and say, hey, please, God, bless my friend Robert, because I need it. And yesterday was a pretty hard day for me, my brother and my dad, telling me that if you don't fucking shut up about all this truth shit, then you better just go. All right. Well, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, and that's a shame. And maybe one day they'll come around, and I hope you have a good round with your brother. So yeah, it's a beautiful day for it. At least it is on this side. So
well, I mean, I kind of actually want to stay and hang out with you guys, but I'm gonna hang out with my brother because I think that's more important. But I also want you guys to maybe think about me a little bit and say, hey, have a good day, and you did already, so that's good. And John, I know I said I was gonna hang out with you till 3, but I hope it's cool with you.
Oh, yeah, no worries, man. I got plenty more material, and we should have some more panel members. So yeah, have a good round, brother, man, and thanks for joining us. And maybe I'll see you Wednesday.
I'll let you know how I do, but I don't want you to think that I'm being like a dick.
Oh, no, you're good, man. It's all good. So
all right, well, I hope you guys have a good show, and I'm just gonna take off for now. And I love you guys, and consider you guys all to be very good friends. And I hope to see you again soon.
Awesome, man. Well, take it easy, brother. And as I was saying, the reason this is such a hard topic to just strike up a conversation with a random stranger is because it's not just there isn't just one way to explain this, and it's sort of difficult to figure out where to start. I mean, how do you tell someone that there is no such thing as a planet, a solar system, galaxies don't exist?
That's the way that you can tell people and get, ostracized.
Right.
But I'll talk to you later. Okay, John?
All right, man. Take it easy, brother. Okay. No such thing as a galaxy or a universe as we know it. I mean, that's not just something that people are going to accept lightly. Yet, it appears that is the truth. It appears that that's what's going on. And for all intents and purposes, there's good evidence that the Earth itself is the centerpiece of the universe, and that the celestial bodies in the heavens are merely a secondary feature of the world, and really science and the culture of scientism has sort of steered us into this totally upside down belief system that puts our Mother Earth as just a sort of a speck of dust off in the corner of just a billion galaxies. So how do you get that into a conversation? How do you explain this to your family and to your friends? It's very difficult. And so something that Robert mentioned earlier is there's a lot of great videos, a lot of great sources on YouTube, articles that you can point to that may explain things better than you can. It's not something that you can just easily approach someone with. And we're pushed really hard through the mass media outlets in order to pre-program people into accepting these whimsical fantasies such as space travel, setting up semi-permanent bases on other worlds. And eventually, I think that the mindset of a lot of people is that we'll eventually get off of this, poisoned, stinking rock and move on to the next planet. I truly believe that is the sort of mindset which rests in the subconscious of a lot of people. This is how people rationalize or justify certain behavior that's detrimental to the balance of the world. If we're conditioned to believe that the world is sort of this disposable rock in outer space, or if we're conditioned to believe that we can one day just move to another world when things get too bad here, hell with the grandkids. If we destroy the rainforests and poison the air, NASA will figure out a way. They've promised us that we'll be colonizing Mars in just 20 years or so we can just kick the proverbial can down the road to some other future generation. Poor bastards. But that really is sort of the mindset. Unfortunately, that has been the propaganda for a couple generations now. When the Apollo fakery was being done in the 60s, they were promising moon bases and Mars bases then. Now, of course, we have this huge propaganda campaign towards setting up semi-permanent colonization on Mars. And so this is really, I believe, lending itself to this mindset that we're, sort of living on a disposable world, and it is our destiny to sort of, give NASA all of our money so that they can figure out a way to solve our problems, after we essentially poison and destroy the Earth. Now, one thing about the Earth, however, is that, of course, we'll find balance eventually, whether it's catastrophically or whether it's over time. The Earth always, seems to find balance because it is, far more massive and powerful than we, tend to think it is in a heliocentric sort of mindset. This whole thing, though, is such an insidious, anti-human, anti-nature deception. I really find it hard to believe that the source of all this is merely that of human imagination and subterfuge. The world at large, again, was primed for the deceptive space program throughout the 50s and the 60s, while in the meantime, the CIA was flooding the streets with extremely potent drugs like LSD, cocaine, heroin. Yep, that was the government bringing all that in. And I believe they did that so as to create a major distraction and a trap for free thinkers. In fact, any possible opposition to NASA's faking of the moon landings, for example, was actually cheering them on, probably high out of their mind. No offense to the hippies, but that's what appears was going on. And people have a propensity to want to fit in with the winning team. And, much like the guys that dress up like clowns and paint their half-naked bodies burgundy and gold for the Redskins game, the scientific community itself has become likened unto that, sort of a witless conga line of fanboys for NASA who never question NASA's assertions or anything that NASA claims. And I could go on and on about NASA and the links of their deception, and maybe we will. But I think that really this whole thing, this whole spherical Earth, is the great deception that's been, sort of forewarned to us in the book of Revelation. And, I'll just read a little bit out of that real quick, and then I've got a few things to say on that. But I'm just going to read. It won't take long. So Revelation 20. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed a little season. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God in Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in 4 quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, which I believe it was Bush 1 and Bush 2, that was their code names in Skull and Bones, were Gog and Magog, just as a side note, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about in the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face of the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which was the book of life, and the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire, and this is the second death, and whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. So, not to get off on too much of a biblical tangent there, but I think that Revelation being written a couple thousand years ago, according to all accounts, how could they possibly foresee a great deception that would deceive the entire world? For as long as I can remember, my mind, along with the minds of all civilized people in recent generations, have been systematically conditioned to accept a preposterous, unbelievable, illogical, insidious lie, which I'm convinced is the great deception described in Revelation. Although this terrible fallacy clashes with common sense and simple geometry and measurement and, of course, biblical scripture, yet the entire world essentially worships and holds fast to the lie and will even defend or perpetuate the lie without even thinking about it. This mendacity is accepted by atheists, Buddhists, Muslims, evangelical Christians, along with virtually all cultures and creeds worldwide. This immense multi-generational series of lies and misunderstandings is so fervently believed by the entire world, the truth is dismissed and even scoffed at by anyone introduced to the topic immediately and without any thought involved whatsoever. Due to the relentless onslaught of lies surrounding this great deception, the truth seems like a ridiculous, impossible theory reserved for the moronic, because the truth is fundamentally incompatible with the great deception. And again, the great deception involves everything, I believe, from the Big Bang to infinite space and galaxies and solar systems. All of that is incompatible with the truth. And the truth being, again, that the Earth is the centerpiece for the known universe, as it were. I hope and pray that each of you out there have the wisdom and ability to open your mind and to help others see and reconsider much of what we've been led to believe as common knowledge, and separate a very simple truth from the complex lies that form the modern scientific paradigm. Whether you believe the Bible is an inspired writing or merely an ancient documentation of the overactive imaginations of scientifically illiterate people from a few thousand years ago is genuinely irrelevant. Over the last several generations, at least, all people of the modern world have indeed been defrauded into believing a preposterous fallacy, which is nothing more than theoretical fantasy founded upon misguided assumption, ignorance, and arrogance, yet is taught in all levels of education as factual. The Bible was correct, at least in the regard that the entire world would be deceived, and that the world is fixed and immovable, and even the very elect would be deceived if that is even possible. Regardless of your education, religious background, or social preferences, this total deception affects us all and shrouds the most important fundamental certitude you could possibly imagine. In fact, the truth is so well hidden, our modern culture has conditioned people into perpetuating the great deception instantly and autonomously. Once you come to fully realize the truth deep in your gut and understand exactly what the great deception is, most people feel an ominous emotion coupled with anger and possibly a comical sense of irony, but most importantly, a need to share the truth with your friends and your family and anyone else who wants to hear it, although most people do not want to hear it. If you're still in the stage of this transition into truth where you're not 100% sure if this is a joke or if this is actually true, or if this is your first time considering this topic seriously, your skepticism and uncertainty is certainly healthy and normal. Let me first state that I was extremely skeptical about this for several months, to the point to where I refused to even consider the topic, which is indeed typical. It's the normal reaction that we all experience. When I finally decided to look into this topic with plans to debunk it, the process to fully realize the truth took me about a week, with very little sleep during that time frame. And to my astonishment, I ultimately came to the irrevocable conclusion that the entire world has been deceived by something so unexpected, so silly. It's a wonder how such a ridiculous deception reached the levels that it has. It's almost supernatural. This goes far beyond modern conspiracies like 9/11 or the so-called Boston bombing, because this deception affects every man, woman, and child living, and all who will live in the future, unless we're able to stop this once and for all, which will take a major effort from everyone who is now awake to the truth. And no, we're not talking about aliens from other galaxies. The stationary plane Earth has been my main focus of research for the last 15 months. And I've personally dedicated many hundreds, probably thousands of hours into pursuing evidence to support the idea that our world is a planet, a spinning sphere in the void of outer space, as it were. And I can't find any such evidence to support that theory. There are thousands of serious researchers and scientists doing the same thing all over the world. And a small segment of the world population has likely been aware of this truth for a long time, although it is apparently one of these secret societies, or Freemasonries, if you will, biggest secrets. Not to open the Freemasonic can of worms again, but there is good evidence to support that the idea of Big G in Freemasonry is related to the Big G of physics, or the gravitational constant. For those of you who don't know, the gravitational constant was discovered by a dead dude named Cavendish, Astronomer Royal, who's most famous for weighing the Earth by hanging several very heavy lead balls in his tool shed to deduce their gravitational pull, if you can believe that. Now, I describe Cavendish as a dead dude because his story is a little bit bizarre and questionable. I have covered his story in a video, but Cavendish was essentially a social outcast, and in my opinion, he may not have actually existed at all. You see, Cavendish lived his life as a recluse, and he actually died the third richest man in Britain in the early 1800s. He avoided contact with all people except for members of his secret boys club with, their secret handshakes and occult agendas. But anyways, whether he existed or not, Cavendish was an effective Trojan horse of sorts for the so-called gravitational constant. History alleges that Cavendish was an introverted genius who kept all his scientific discoveries locked away, completely secret from his chums at the Royal Boys Club, whom he was apparently so fond of. Cavendish never published any of his alleged groundbreaking scientific discoveries, never published anything really significant, including the infamous lead ball experiment, which was a farce, in case you were wondering. Keep in mind, all of the contemporaneous members of his royal clique were renowned for one discovery or invention or theoretical hyperbole or another, all except Cavendish. So after Cavendish died, they allegedly scoured through his journals and found that he was apparently far ahead of his cohorts in terms of scientific advancement, and had described scientific and mathematical principles that they had been credited with discovering prior to his death. Now, without going into too much detail, it appears to me that they threw the dirty water in with the baby, if you catch my drift. They sort of allowed Cavendish's Trojan horse, his supposed weighing of the Earth, into the scientific record, along with all of his sort of contemporaneous Astronomer Royal clique, all of their work. And we still use the hypothetical gravitational constant to this day, more or less. It's changed very slightly since Cavendish's original estimation. Now, keep in mind, he claimed to have weighed the Earth by hanging a few lead balls in his tool shed, purporting that the lead balls were generating gravity and that he could measure this elusive gravity, which has never been done before or since. This whole scenario is, of course, ridiculous, because nowhere else in nature will you find even an enormous, dense object show any signs of, generating a gravitational pull. Yet Cavendish was somehow able to convince his lead balls to demonstrate gravitational pull, and subsequently claimed to have weighed the Earth using this preposterous experiment. Now, although he had attended the University of Cambridge in St. Peter's College, known as Peterhouse, he dropped out 3 years later in 1751 without earning any sort of degree. At any rate, it appears to me that a very sneaky group of people associated with this Cavendish character, and through the college and, of course, the secret societies of his day, It seems as if they embellished on Cavendish's life to some extent, and I could see how the scientific community would be persuaded to agree with with the findings of a man presented as an unparalleled genius who may very well have been a total fabrication, or at least, a patsy exaggerated by a group of theoretical scientists who desperately wanted to put a number on the gravitational constant. And just to give the textbook explanation for the gravitational constant, it's symbolized by big G, is a physical constant that appears in the equation for Newton's law of gravitation. Isaac Newton claims to have quantified the behavior of the force of gravity. He hypothesized that the gravitational force between two objects is proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between their centers. This equation describing gravitational constant is F equals gm 1m squared over r squared. But this to me is ridiculous, because if Cavendish could produce, gravity in his tool shed by hanging balls, then why doesn't, a giant skyscraper made of, dense material produce any gravitational pull? Why only Cavendish's lead balls? At any rate, the topic of gravity is totally irrelevant once you come to terms with the truth that the world is a stationary plane. Gravity is a theoretical fantasy, which is only necessary if you assume that the Earth is a spinning sphere in the vacuum of space. I apologize for getting off on that tangent, but it's really important to try and understand exactly what point in history this massive series of misunderstandings turned into a deception, turned into such a strong foothold of lies that it's taught in every classroom as factual. Now, Newton was commissioned to mathematically describe how theoretical orbital mechanics were possible. So that's what he did with his famous work, the Principia, although that was all very much theoretical and was not intended to be a model of the solar system or universe. Only that's what theoretical physics has done, has sort of taken that theory and used that as the framework for our model of the universe. The only problem is, just because a premise is theoretically possible and can be described or quantified mathematically, doesn't necessarily make it true. Again, the truth is the world is a stationary plane, and the law of physics, what goes up must come down, is simply governed by the natural laws of density and buoyancy, and all matter aligns itself to this principle, and gravity has nothing to do with it. Gravity doesn't exist. And I urge all of you to take some time to research the topic of gravity, or at least watch my videos for detailed explanations covering a variety of proofs and topics which have helped, I believe, thousands of people come to terms with this reality and to free themselves of the great deception. If you didn't understand the first description I mentioned, stationary plane Earth, what I'm revealing is that the Earth is not a spinning sphere flying through outer space around the sun. In fact, the entire Big Bang Theory is fallacious, along with the idea of solar systems, galaxies, and of course, the spinning spherical Earth. There's so much to cover on this topic, admittedly. So I urge everyone to give the topic an honest, skeptical scrutiny. And a great place to start is I've got a Flat Earth Proof playlist on my YouTube channel. I've also got the Earth Not a Globe series. It's a playlist. Those are a couple good starting points. I've gone into fairly great detail debunking many of the alleged proofs of the heliocentric model, as well as documented evidence supporting the fact that the Earth is a stationary plane. I created these videos to provide my honest testimonial that in all my life, I never would have imagined purporting that the accepted model of the universe and nature were terribly wrong. Yet I am compelled to continue helping others come to terms with this stunning revelation. As I mentioned briefly before, in many cases, people hear the phrase flat Earth and envision a disk flying through outer space, spinning around, which is not the case at all, as far as I'm concerned. we really must labor to discard the idea of infinite space and galaxies altogether, and consider the possibility that the world itself is quite possibly a limitless physical plane, and what we consider to be the universe is merely an endless expanse of mysterious lights in the sky, which we may never fully understand, and nor we may not be intended to understand. Indeed, the world itself is fixed and immovable. While the boundaries of the world might be superficial or merely psychological, only a few men throughout history have ever traveled far into the southernmost regions of the world. This short list would include U.S. Admiral Richard E. Byrd, and he was sort of wishy-washy after his excursion down there. The first reports from the U.S. military, Operation High Jump, were that the Antarctic, or the southernmost region of the world, was rich in all sorts of commodities that would be extremely attractive to the modern world. And yet, after they mapped out the Antarctic, allegedly, they more or less put up keep out signs and drafted the Antarctic and the Arctic treaties, which essentially mean that there's not to be any corporate activity or free roaming in the southernmost or northernmost regions of the world. I believe that this is because there is more land out there, and there's evidence to support that. I want to really quickly thank all of you guys for joining us today. I've gone 2 hours. It's been a real treat having Robert on. He's a really great guy, fun to talk to. And I want to thank all of you guys for joining us. Keep in mind, this show and my channel is viewer supported. So you can support this channel through fan funding on my YouTube page or through PayPal to johnelance@gmail.com. That's JONELANCE@gmail.com. And just wrapping it up, one of the things that Robert and I were talking about prior to the show was that his family's having a hard time, coming to terms with this. They don't want to hear it. And my suggestion, to him and to anyone that's struggling with this is, if you explain this to someone and they don't get it, they make fun of you. If it's a matter of contention, I wouldn't make that big of a deal of it. It's not up to us to necessarily convince people of this. We can introduce them to the topic, and it's really up to the individual whether or not they want to pursue it. So that's my best advice. If you want to bring it up to someone that you care about, they may take to it, and there's lots of resources online that you can point them to help them sort of understand where we're coming from. But don't take it to lengths to where you're going to sever family ties or anything like that. I mean, it is important, but we can only lead a horse to water. You can't make him drink, and I think that's a good proverb, and it's used in many, many ways. So, at any rate, I wanted to hang up my phone. I wanted to thank you guys again so much for joining us. I'll be doing another live show tomorrow with Jeranism, so definitely catch that tomorrow. That's Sunday the 31st, at 3 o'clock Eastern. So I think that will either be on Jeranism or Glowbusters, so I'll post a link up on Facebook for that. Other than that, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow, and we'll see you next Wednesday.